I'm sorry, Lavernia, I cannot visit you anymore. They tell me that I can only send you text messages on my telephone, and that's it. That's all I can do now, so no more visits, you know. And she started crying, and I was just like, what is the matter with you?
What if you had emergency contacts assigned to you, but then you had the responsibility of finding your own friends in the ward and ministering to them?
Friendship, it begins with you.
And now for a cultural call-out. We sure don't appreciate that.
Welcome back to Salty Saints. My name is Hayden Holm. This is my brother Tanner. And in today's cultural call-out, we're talking about the ministering paradox. This is something that I noticed when I was in an Elders Quorum presidency. We would invite the brethren in for interviews. We would sit them down and we would get a feel for if they were ministering. Most of the brethren that came to the interview said, yeah, I'm ministering. And we would ask them one question. And every single brother answered the question the exact same way. The question we would ask is, are you being ministered to? And the answer every single time was no. And so I was like, wait a second. I sat down like Ricky for a second, scratching my chin like, somebody's got some splaining to do because this isn't adding up. What's going on here? And I think as we've been talking about forgotten elders quorums that just have died out, where brethren are checked out, they don't know each other, they're strangers. I think ministering is the key to making brotherhood work in the elders quorum.
Yeah, 100%. Now, this is great that we're talking about it, because this is going to motivate me to be better at ministering myself, because I'm terrible at it. So I just had an interview, which my presidency did a great job on that interview, by the way. They sat down and just really talked through the things that we needed to, got to know me a bit better, which I think was good. I think that's really what you should do in those interviews. But yeah, I've definitely seen that in past presidencies that I've been in when we do interviews. Like, everyone's ministering, but no one's being ministered to. It's a fun little paradox there. And I think that, like you were saying, the real problem is that nobody actually knows each other. So you could think you're ministering to someone, but somebody else might not even know your name while you're doing it. You might be visiting. Or
that's a really good point, because I think the average experience, like, you figure out, at least for me, the way that I figured out who my ministering brothers are is about 6 months after moving into the ward, or after not hearing from anyone. My wife will eventually ask, like, hey, who are our ministering brothers? And then I'll open up the tools app and I'll pull it open and I'll see two brothers on there that I've never seen before. And I'm like, it's these guys, And then it makes a lot more sense in your mind, because you realize that when you pass them in the hall, they give you a look like the quiet kid who wants to ask you to dance, and you're just like, oh, hey, how are you? And they're just like, hey, and they give you a hi, and you're like, oh, that was kind of weird. It's like, oh, that's my ministering brother. And I bet he just counted that as ministering.
Well, so that's an interesting insight, is that there's another paradox. There's a paradox on top of a paradox here, where a lot of men will feel guilty about not ministering. And if it's gone on too long, then they'll just avoid you entirely at church, right? Like, they'll just, they'll feel guilty, and they're like, I should be ministering to him, but I'm not, and I've been not doing it for so long that it's just uncomfortable to even talk to him. So I'm just going to, it ends up with more separation and more absence rather than less, which is funny, because you were assigned to them because your presidency was inspired to put you together. But if you slack off too long, then you drift apart, which I've done before, I think, like, everyone should know on this channel by now that, like, all the advice and direction that we've provided so far is stuff that we're going to be trying or trying currently in our process, right?
Totally. Hey,
we're building this plane as we're flying it
in ward council. So so I'm trying to cut back the meetings. It's been going pretty well, but that's
great.
We're not saying we're perfect, but we are trying to aim higher on this channel. That's the goal. It's just like, let's elevate our aim, because I think the typical aim for most, I think most people view their ministering brothers, like, best case scenario as emergency contacts. Like, hey, if crap hits the fan, I've got someone that I can call. If I can't reach anyone else that's primarily connected to me, then I can reach out to these guys. And then I think the typical case scenario for most brethren is, it feels similar to like a relationship where the quiet girl asks you out to the dance, even though she never talked to you before, and she doesn't talk to you after she asks you out to the dance, and you're just like,
Oh yeah.
what's going on? So do you want to go to the dance? What's up? Are you gonna get to know me or not? Are you gonna keep me at arm's length? Like, what's this all about? It's very confusing, especially in the age where your ministering assignment might change, and because tools is great, you don't get notified when the change happens. Yeah, like half the time you're just like, oh,
Yeah.
I got new ministering brothers. I wonder when that happened. But no, I think that's a great call out to make. One of the things that I've noticed, I feel like home teaching got to a point where people were actually going and doing more. So I think more stuff was being done. So there was more effort being expended in the home teaching program. And when we made the switch to ministering, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like most people have stepped off the gas. Where
Oh yeah.
people are like, okay, nobody's going to be checking me. No one's micromanaging my efforts. I don't have to do like a monthly visit and break out the first presidency message and sit down with a family with 4 kids that are screaming and running around and try and read it quietly,
Yeah.
So I don't know. That might just be my experience, but I do feel like ever since we made that switch, people have been doing less. And it was funny because I was in a presidency when they made the switch, and I remember there was this one old high priest guy who got super upset about it, and he treated it like the younger guys were pushing ministering now. But he approached this widow in the ward who was previously his home teaching assignment. He approached this lady and said, "I'm sorry, Lavernia, I cannot visit you anymore. They tell me that I can only send you text messages on my telephone, and that's it. That's all I can do now. So no more visits." And she started crying, and I was just like, "What is the matter with you?"
Okay.
So it's similar to the change. I view it similar to the change. Like when we got rid of the second hour, there were people that are like, "Oh boy, we get to do less now." But when in reality, if you understand, if you have like eyes to see, ears to hear, it's actually a call to do more. And I think ministering is actually a call to do more if you take it seriously. So let me tell you some good examples that I've had. But I cut you off. You were going to say something. What were you going to say?
No, I was just gonna say it's a call to do more, but it's a call to think more about it, right? You just have more freedom to do it in a way that follows inspiration, right? So it might not be technically more, but it's more. You have more accountability in it because you have more ability. You have more freedom and flexibility on how you do it.
Right. Well, and as a young father, it actually fills me with a sense of relief knowing that I don't have to try and keep all of my kids controlled while a couple of guys come over and try and read a message. It's like, okay, great, awesome. Read that message. That was good. I'm glad you're reading it again to me. Awesome, great, cool. My kids are screaming, running around the house. All right, let's. And then they're out the door, and it's like everyone breathes a sigh of relief. Like, we made it. We did it. Yes.
Yeah, and it was always like sometimes they would come on Sunday afternoons. You're trying to nap, and it did not work out well. It was just interrupted the Sunday easy sleep, and that was very frustrating. So yeah, I like the new method, and I like the way that people reach out and start to communicate in different ways. I think it's great as long as you do it right.
As long as it's getting done. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've had 2 ministering visits since they made the change from home teaching to ministering. So this is throughout 3 different wards. I've had 2 people come by, 2 companionships come by. One of them dropped off like some kisses around Christmas time, and then another one dropped off some cookies, and that was all she wrote when it comes to ministering, like the official ministering. So now, one thing I do want to point out is some unofficial ministering that has been going on that I think we might be able to learn some things from. So in my last ward, we had a brother who he heard through the grapevine, because I gave a sacrament talk and I mentioned this, but that I run. And so he came over to my apartment and he was just like, "Hey, word on the street is you run. Do you want to run with me?" And I was pretty hesitant because this guy's built like a runner. Like, he's lean, he's mean, and he's built like the kind of guy that could run really fast for a really long time basically the Lamborghini of runners. I have a RAV4 model body, and I understand that no matter how hard I train, I'm only going to ever be able to achieve like a very slow pace, relatively speaking. So initially I was like, no, it's not going to happen. I'm not doing that. You're going to lap me. It's going to be embarrassing. We'll get you next time. But he continued to persist. He tried like 2 or 3 more times, and he assured me, he was like, I'm going to run at your pace. I go slow. Don't worry. I sent him my pace. I'm like, maybe like a 9, maybe a 10-minute pace,
Yeah.
And he was like, totally. I am fine to do that. That's great. And so I was like, okay, all right. I hesitantly accepted, and we started running together. So we got together in the mornings and we started running. And that one invitation turned into us running together almost every single morning for about like 2 years. And
Wow.
he eventually introduced me to like his group of ultra marathon runners, and we started running together. And so I started running longer distances, and I started making more friends with them, and it turned into this really cool community of friends that I developed out there. And it made me feel really great. I was just like, it made me look forward to A, spending time with him, but also B, going to church, because I had somebody that I was a really good friend with, because while we would run, we would talk, and we would have just conversations about whatever was going on in our lives. And so I was able to get a lot of what was going on in here off my shoulders and just out there. And we were able to just like joke and laugh and just struggle together. And it was a really great time. And that eventually turned into us going to work out with another brother in the ward, Justin Keat, who was on. We were able to go to the high school gym and just lift weights with him in the morning. And it turned into us becoming really good friends. And that gave me even more of a reason to go to church. And when I went to church, I felt like I actually had brotherhood, because I was going to see these guys throughout the week. They were checking in with me. I was checking in with them. Even though they weren't my ministering assignment, we were checking in with each other. We were in sync, and I felt like I had brotherhood.
Oh, yeah. There you go. So gotcha, right? That's ministering.
Yeah, there it is.
So I think that you're really onto something there, and that makes me think, because like what you said at the beginning, having like emergency contacts is not a bad thing in the ward.
No.
Like that's not a bad baseline. But what if you had emergency contacts assigned to you, but then you had the responsibility of finding your own friends in the ward and ministering to them? Like you didn't have them assigned, but like you go find somebody and you minister to them, and you let me know who you're going to minister to. And maybe some people might get left out on that approach. But I think what you're really sharing here is that shared interests really helped build a bond that existed outside of a requirement or an assignment, that led to true ministering, where you could actually really rely on each other, which is awesome.
Right. Yeah, it was just our shared interest, because we already had time carved out of our days to run, to exercise and stuff like that. We were just doing it by ourselves. And so by just extending that invitation, it didn't take any extra effort on my part, So it ended up turning into something I looked forward to. It was like, sweet, I get a play date almost like 4 or 5 times a week, because we're just overlapping in our interests here, which is really cool. But I came across a study. It says men's friendship. So this is, men make friendships in a very, very different way than women. Women can make friendships where they just talk, where they can just call each other, they can talk on the phone, and they can build a wonderful relationship that way. Men, they need friendship. Timber, looking at you. Well, they need friendship, and there are a lot of people out there that do not believe that men need friends, and we're here to cut against that. Men do need friends. Ministers should be your friends, but men make friends in a very different way. So this study came out. It says men's friendships are just as important and complex as women's, even if they look different. Men's friendships tend to be based on shared activities or interests, and they often have a more hierarchical approach to social dynamics. However, men's friendships can provide a sense of belonging and support during difficult times, and they are crucial for our well-being. If you're looking to build stronger friendships, make an effort to reach out to your friends regularly. be open and honest with them, and find shared activities or hobbies to enjoy together. Look at that. So I read that study and I was like, I think that's ministry. I think that's what the brethren were talking about when they said you should be ministry. You shouldn't just go over there with your Leahona, in your article, and you're bouncing your kid on your lap and you're trying to give a whole song and dance. That's not ministry. Ministering is like, hey, let me get involved in your life. Let me actually dig in and get invested to who you are as a person. The only way that can happen in a normal and natural way is if you have genuine shared interests. There's another study I want to touch down. It says, while male friendships often start with shared activities, these common interests can lead to deeper emotional support over time. Engaging in activities together creates opportunities for men to open up and provide mutual support, which is crucial for mental health and well-being. In your experience, does that sound wild? Does that sound like something out of left field?
I mean, it sounds great. It sounds like exactly what we need is to build these relationships based off of shared interest. The pushback that I've seen in the past is just the lack of time, which I think you've addressed, that if you're sharing interests, that you can also share that time where you spend time on those interests, which is really good. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, it requires men to get up earlier or stay up later, which is okay. Maybe that's just the effort, the cost of having deeper relationships, right? It's just a little bit of sleep. So I think that, how that translates into an organization or a structure like the Elders Quorum or the Ward, I think that's where we see potential points of friction, because a lot of the families that I'm ministering to currently, a couple of them are widows, right? So I don't have a whole lot of shared interests between them, except for like really good food, I mean, there's a couple interests, but I think that there needs to be a base layer of the people that you need to minister to in a more spiritual and like administrative sense. Like, I'm here for you in case things happen, but also there needs to be this this overlayer of networking and friendships built upon that, which is entirely in our hands. We're entirely responsible for that, and you won't get a clear direction or assignment for that.
Now, here's the thing, and I do believe, I don't want to say like, yeah, you shouldn't go out there and make your own friends or anything like that, because I do think there is definitely a source of that. When it comes to ministering, and if you're sitting in a quorum and you're like, yeah, nobody's ministering to each other, nobody's doing anything, I would say maybe we take a step back and rethink the way that we view ministering assignments and how those assignments are being made. I think the typical process is the primary filter is geography. We say, all right, who is living close to each other? And then we can make the assignments from there. And I've been in a couple highly transient wards that were next to neighborhoods. And so it was like the apartments and the neighborhoods. And what that led to was like a bunch of really tired, young, starving college students ministering to each other. And then the neighborhoods ministering to each other. And it turned into like two mini wards within the ward, and it kept everyone kind of at arm's length, and nobody really knew each other and stuff like that. And I understand the geography argument. It's like, yeah, it's going to be more convenient. It's going to be probably easier for them to minister to each other. But I wonder if instead of the primary filter being geography, if maybe the primary filter is shared interests. So maybe, could you imagine if you get into an Elders Quorum, they give you a survey and they say like, hey, what are your top 5 interests or something like that? And then you give off those interests, and then that information is given to the Elders Quorum presidencies, who can then say, all right, well, we've got these different companionships and these different families, and it looks like these brethren all share interests. Maybe all of these guys like hunting, these guys like fishing, these guys like running, these guys like working out, things like that. And then you can make those assignments so that it makes it normal and natural for them to connect outside of the ministering assignment or outside of the ministering interview or at church. Because I think if it's easy for them to connect outside of church, it makes it that much more easy to connect inside of church. And it gives them that many more reasons to come back.
I've actually done that before in presidencies. We've made, ministering assignments based on geography. And like you said, it's very convenient because the goal as a presidency was to lower the barriers for people so that they could be more able to minister. But what, like you said, what we did have happen is that the college group, because we were in a transient ward as well, they were hyper in tune with each other, and then the families in the neighborhood were in tune with each other, but there was a disconnect between the two to a certain degree. And it wasn't like a major one. It was just on the level of friendship, there wasn't as many opportunities for crossover, because there's just not, they're not as many. We reduced the contact points between these two groups dramatically. So I think that ministering helps bleed over, into different groups, and helps increase face time with these people on these different groups that will increase the potential for you to make friends out of them. Right. That's what ministering really does, is it opens up opportunities for friendship if you do it correctly. Now, whether or not you make friends and act on it is up to you entirely, and your situation and your level of effort. But if you shift, like you said, the intent of like, I know these people like to do this thing, and I know these people believe in this thing, or even shared ideologies or things like that. There's a couple couple families in my ward.
What are you talking about? Are you talking like anti-vaxxers getting together in the ward, breaking out the tin foil and putting their hats on it?
We'll put all the flat earthers on a hill over there.
There you go.
No, for instance, we homeschool our kids, and there's another family who also homeschools in the ward, and we tend to, that's one of those ideological points. Like, oh, okay, these two groups might be able to minister together, and probably be more likely to, because they share so much interest. Now, so if you could use that to your advantage, great. It brings up a question about less active members and trying to reintegrate them into the ward. But if you have the data on them and what they like to do, that like what their interests are, then you can use that to help fellowship them a little bit better. The trick is finding that data, like you were saying, like filling out forms, or the round tables with snacks would be a great place to get to know your quorum well enough to start basing assignments off of shared interests, for sure.
Here's the crazy part, is that these brethren that I became really, really good friends with, I was in the apartments, they were in the neighborhoods. So we had a whole like Romeo Juliet kind of dynamic there. I'm not sure which one I was, but I'll leave that for the viewer to decide. But we had a really strong relationship, and every time I go back to St. George, I connect with them. Like and maybe I'll put up a video of us eating donuts at Justin's gym. But yeah, we have a great time every time we go back. And it's all started because a brother decided to start ministering, because he was just like, hey, I have an interest, you have an interest, let's pursue it together, And it was great. It was so normal. It was so natural. And those are the key words that the brethren keep pushing lately. It's just like normal and natural. Normal and natural, people. Stop being weird. And ministering could be one of those really weird things, like speaking about emergency contacts, it's like, I honestly, if I had like a bad situation going on, I would be more likely to call my close friends out here than I would my actual ministering brothers. Now, I actually don't know who my ministering brothers are right now. I just realized that as we were talking. I'm like, what? But yeah, no, that can happen, And so I would feel, if crap hits the fan, I'm calling my friends, or I'm calling my family before I call these people. And so if you can become a friend, meaning you do your ministering well, then I'm probably going to call you. And I did have a guy out here, as soon as we moved out, he found out that I like running, and he told me, he was like, hey, I go running most mornings. You want to run together? And I was like, sure. Yeah. Awesome. And we got to know each other super well. That helped me feel like a part of the ward from the very beginning of moving here, because we were new to the area. We didn't have any friends. We don't have any family here. I got to know him super well. We talked about everything. And he told me, he was like, hey, I've never done a half marathon. Do you want to do one with me? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so we ended up training for a half marathon. We did it together. It was a great time. But we became friends, and now he's someone that I would call if an emergency came up. Way before I called, I opened up my tools app and was like, okay, where are those ministering brothers? I need help, I think that may be the vision that the brethren have for ministering. I might be out in left field on that, but I think that's what they're hoping for, is that you become somebody's friend in the most genuine sense. And let's see, in April, I think it was 2018. This was Sister Jean B. Bingham in General Conference. She said, ministering looks like Elders Quorum and Relief Society presidencies prayerfully counseling about assignments rather than leaders just handing out slips of paper. I don't know how many times you've had that happen where you have like a guy going around the quorum and he's got like 2 big slips of paper in his hand and he's just like passing them out. You know, he's just like dealing them like he's he's a dealer at blackjack, you know, in a casino. He's like, flip, 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 flip.
Hell yeah.
And so you get these names on a piece of paper. You're like, I don't know who these people are, you know. But how much of a difference would it be if they like sat down and they were like, hey, you guys actually, like, this is the husband, he loves running, or he is big into weightlifting, or he's big into like video games or something like that. I think you guys could hit it off really well, you know, and that could give you something to go off of. Like when you start that conversation with your new ministering family, you could text them and say like, hey, I'm your new ministering brother. I heard you like running. We should totally do something sometime, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then that just makes it so much more natural than the go-to, which is like, hey, I'm your ministering brother. How would you like to be ministered to? You know, or dropping off the cookies, coming by with the cookies like, hey, I'm your ministering brother. Just sure do appreciate you guys. And just let me know if there's anything you need. Okay, well, sure do appreciate you. See you later.
I feel like this should definitely happen where you take one Sunday out of the year or whatever, you know, and you get all of the men out of primary and out of all the other spaces and into Elders Quorum. And then you just let them mingle and discuss their ministering assignments. You know, like go find your companion, go, you know, find a corner or a classroom, or go outside, talk through your families, make plans. And, you know, if you can go at that point, go find the men in your families and go and talk to them. You know, just kind of take a whole hour and make a plan and break the ice with some of these people so you don't have to do that later over text or, you know, eventually never because you don't want to do it. So I think that should definitely happen. You just take a Sunday and do it during Elders Quorum.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to finish the quote, I mean, look at this. She says it completely supports what you're saying. It says it looks like counseling about the individuals and families in person as assignments are given to ministering brothers and sisters. It looks like going for a walk, getting together for a game night, offering service, or even serving together. It looks like visiting a person or talking on the phone or chatting online or texting. It looks like delivering a birthday card and cheering at a soccer game. Those are all things that friends do. You know?
Yeah.
Like friendship, it begins with you, you know, and it's spelled Time, right? So if I were to pull a parallel for what ministering should be, I think a lot of quorums right now, I would say holes, and not the way that you would typically think. So I think of Zero from Holes. He was a kid that would not engage with his quorum, right? So he was a kid, he was completely checked out to the point where like his Elders Quorum instructor, Dr. Pendansky, was just getting frustrated with him. He was just like, you will just not talk to me, will you? You know? And Zero just like stayed checked out. He was like, oh, I ain't talking to you. And he didn't talk with the other guys. He was serving with the other guys. He didn't talk to them. It wasn't until Stanley had an interest that he was interested in that he started opening up and talking to Stanley. He was like, oh, I want to learn how to read. Will you teach me how to read? You know, and then they started reading together, and then they became really close friends, you know. And then he carried him up the mountain and sang the song, if only. But yeah, but it led to a really cool thing, and it broke a generational curse, you know. And they were able to find brotherhood, and they were able to heal together and find this really great treasure, you know. And it's like, yeah, ministering can be a big treasure for people that find it, because it can really come in clutch, even if you are in the middle of the desert, seemingly doing something mundane and backbreaking for years. If you find brotherhood, you might find treasure.
Absolutely, man. That's a whole nother, you know, movie-based video.
Yeah, pun intended.
That was a good pun too.
Yeah,
there you go.
So the other thing, if scriptural account, where did Jesus go when he called Peter? Did he go to the synagogue? Did he go to the local elders quorum happening at the synagogue and pick the quietest boy who had his arms folded and his head down, you know, and who was answering all the questions or reading all the slips of paper? He went out where Peter was fishing, He went out to where Peter was fishing, and he actually helped him in his interest. He was just like, "Hey, try doing it this way," and then Peter caught a ton of fish, and so it's like Peter was interested in fishing. Some people might say like, "Well, that was his job," It's like, well, he did go fishing after the Savior died. He was just like, "I don't know what to do. I'm going fishing." I don't think that the average person would be like in a midlife crisis saying like, "I don't know what to do. I'm clocking in at the office. I'm going back to my cubicle."
Right.
So I think there's a little bit of a parallel there. Is that Jesus, and the highest title that he gave was that of friends. Like no
Absolutely.
greater love a man has than this, to lay down his life for a friend. And so he laid down his life for everyone, and he wants to have that kind of friendship level with us, which means we need to engage with people, discover their interests, and serve with them in their interests.
Yeah, well, isn't that there's a funny saying that says that the greatest miracle Jesus ever did as a mortal man was have 12 guy friends.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
It's tough, and men struggle with this. So I think that's why we have assignments to do it, right? Like that's why it's a priesthood responsibility, because we're not good at it. And men need to excel at it in order to really build up the, Christ's kingdom.
Totally. So what is the takeaway for the average dad in the age of home-centered church?
Well, I think there's places you can start. I think you should start by, if you don't have a lot of common with your current ministering families, just be consistent and build trust. And we're humans. There's got to be points of crossover in terms of interest to some degree, right? You can build friendships. It might take a little bit longer, but with your existing families, build friendships, build trust. So when crap does hit the fan, they actually want to reach out to you. That's what I would do first of all. And then on top of that, this is, extra credit, but not really. It should be kind of expected now, is that you need to go out and make some friends in the ward, and this is something that everyone needs to start thinking about, is where I know there are other men in the ward who like to do the things that I like to do. There's no way that you're that unique where you can't find anyone who doesn't share your interests. So find those people, reach out to them, and start making some friends. I think that's the best thing you can do to increase your ministering.
I would also say for presidencies, like consider making those ministering assignments primarily based off of shared interests. Find a way to get that data, make those assignments based off of shared interests, counsel with them, and let them know, like, hey, you guys have shared interests here, based off of what you've told me, this could work out well for you. If you are not in a presidency, I would say go out there and make some friends, and find the people that have shared interests with you and pursue those interests together. It doesn't require any extra time outside of the time you already have dedicated to those interests. And then you will develop brotherhood, you will develop friendship. And you could probably, for, bonus points, little hack here, you could probably approach your Elders Quorum president and say like, hey, I've become really good friends with so-and-so. I would love to be their ministering brother. And I will leave it to you to pray about it. And if it feels right, let me know. And that would be great. But I think most leaders probably would pray about it and feel like, yeah, this may be a good move because you are friends in the ward.
Yeah. If you have preferences on who you would like to be ministering companions with, or which families you'd like to minister to, please let the presidencies know. Like they love having that kind of data. It's so helpful when making those decisions. So I think that's great.
Totally agree. All right. And so I think this could be one of the ways that Elders Quorums come together, that brotherhood is actually built within the quorum. Because could you imagine if you had enough brothers that were doing that just on their own efforts, just building brotherhood outside of the quorum, hanging out, going to the gym, running, fishing, hiking, playing video games, and then they came together, you would have a tight-knit Elders Quorum that's ready to engage with the lessons. And so
absolutely,
I think we're getting close to time. So my name is Hayden Holm. This is Tanner. And until next time, this is Salty Saints.